In a world of confusion, where timelines collide and prophecy is often misunderstood, a gateway is opening, a gathering unlike any other, where the voices of the prophets echo once again. From July 8th to 11th, 2026, leaders, teachers, and seekers will converge at the Todd Hall Retreat Center for a journey through the eschatology of the prophets. This is the Gateway to Fulfillment, featuring voices you know and trust. Join Steve Magua, Tim Martin, Michael Miano, Zach Davis, Dr. Don K. Preston, and William Bell Jr., with more to be announced. For 4 unforgettable days, you'll explore the prophetic scriptures, uncover the fullness of God's redemptive plan, and gain a deeper understanding of our fulfilled hope. Seats are limited, so secure your spot now. Register today at the link in the description. Don't just watch prophecy. Step into fulfillment. If you're passionate about biblical truth, like this video, and subscribe for more powerful content and conference updates. We'll see you there.
All right, so I am back again. I am going to give a few moments here so that people who are in the previous broadcast can join. So let me make sure that I have that. So if you are joining me from the previous broadcast, please make sure that you begin sharing. We are still having problem with Facebook for a moment, but it's going to join in. Let's remove it and then save changes. So we are still waiting for Facebook to catch up. I'm still waiting for Facebook to catch up. Let's see if it will catch up. Sometimes when you do back-to-back, when you do them back-to-back broadcasts, you have an issue with Facebook. Yeah, I'm still having a problem with Facebook. All right, I am still waiting for Facebook to actually join in here. Can you tell me where you're joining me from? Are you guys on YouTube able to see what I'm going through here? Can you guys, can you tell me where you're watching me from? This is part number 3. This is part number 3. We are trying to get Facebook to line up, and it's taking its time. Are we on Facebook? Or is it only on YouTube? All right, I see it now. All right, I see myself now. All right, so apologies. I had some technical issue doing back-to-back broadcasts, but now it seems to be working. So let me invite all those who are part of it, and let's see if they're able to come back. So do bear with me. I think I might have to edit it. All right. So required mailbox, you say I am up on YouTube. Thank you. Let's see if I can also put up the groups on Facebook, because I know some of these groups were already part of the discussion earlier. While everybody is joining. We're just going to take our time here, at least to begin with. Just at the beginning. All right. Now it seems like we are getting a quorum here for those of you who are there before. Let me make sure that I actually tag them personally. So we have been listening to man called Sean, and he is refuting preterism, saying it cannot possibly be true. And I've been showing that Sean cannot possibly have studied his Bible, right? And let me remember not to include the gentleman who said, please don't tag me. He's not a Christian. And that's a fair thing. When somebody tells you don't tag me, I think it's fair enough to say, all right, I don't have to tag you. So we are at reason number 3 of Sean, where he has been showing that he doesn't believe that full preterism is a reasonable proposition for a Christian to hold, right? Now, so let me bring back Sean onto the screen, and we are just going to continue from where we had left off. We're just going to continue from where we had left off, which means that if you have not watched part number 2, after this broadcast, you'll be able to go, and I didn't do it this time, but I'll link part number 2 or the playlist for 1 and 2 in the description section. I will also link this video by Sean so that we can continue to engage with him. And of course, after this whole series is done, I am going to be posting it on his YouTube channel so that he can decide whether he wants to look into these things or not. Let me reiterate, I believe that Sean is my brother in Christ. I believe that Sean belongs in the kingdom. I also believe that Sean is sincerely wrong, just as I'm pretty sure he believes I'm sincerely wrong. Therefore, the goal here is to respond with a spirit of grace, with firmness, with biblical correction, so that if Sean is truly seeking the truth, then he will be able to either engage with this, do a little bit more study, and either change his mind or come back and convince me, no, brother, you are still wrong. Father's Joy, it is good to see you there on YouTube. So let's keep going here. Let's listen a little bit more to Sean.
In verse 13, Jesus said that he who endures to the end will be saved. And this is speaking, of course, about salvation, not being saved from the war itself. But Jesus didn't return in 70 AD to save anybody. But in the end times, this will happen. Reason number...
All right, so Sean goes to verse number 13 of Matthew 24, because he's using Matthew 24 to disprove preterism, full preterism particularly. He said in verse number 13, Jesus says that whoever endures to the end will be saved. And then he says, and it does not involve being saved from the war in 70 AD. It involves, he doesn't quite explain what, but he says it involves salvation at the end of time. I guess that's what he's really alluding to. But here's my question. Is Jesus talking about salvation from anything other than the war that was to happen at the time of the second coming? Can we agree, Sean, and any futurist, that when the Bible speaks about salvation, especially in Matthew 24 and related passages, it is talking about being saved from the wrath of God, being saved from the punishment of God? And Sean, you already did mention that you believe in a second coming or a rapture that is post-tribulational but pre-wrath, which means you do believe that salvation has to do with being saved from a war. The question is the war in our future or is the war in our past? In fact, we have already established here in Matthew 24 that before Matthew 24, that before the coming of the Lord, right, the temple would be destroyed, verse number 2. And that there will be wars and rumors of wars, verse number 7 and verse number 8, right? Kingdoms will fight against kingdoms and so on and so forth. Then now you reference verse number 13, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. Now notice that when I was giving my previous refutation of what you're saying, in Matthew 10, when Jesus is only speaking to the 12, he says, And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. I am saying that the end here is the end of the Jewish age. It is the end of the temple system. It is the end of the war. Moreover, this statement, whoever endures to the end will be saved, in Matthew 24 and in Matthew 10, is derived from Joel. Let's go to the book of Joel. So in the book of Joel, which I know you did not consider, but I hope that you will consider, Mr. Sean, Joel chapter 2. Let's see what happens. What are people being saved from? What are people being saved from? Now it begins in Joel chapter 2. Blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble. For the day of the Lord is coming, it is near. It is a day of darkness. It is a day of gloom. It is a day of clouds and thick darkness. Like blackness there is spread upon the mountains a great and powerful people. What are they doing? Their like has never been seen before, nor will again after them. Seen where? Seen in Zion. Seen in his holy mountain. He says, fire devours before them. Behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them. Behind them the land becomes a desolate wilderness. Nothing escapes them. Their appearance is like the appearance of horses, like war horses. So this is what was coming to Zion. Now let's run to the very end, where now where Acts chapter 2 is actually quoting the coming of the Lord. It says in verse number 28, the Lord will pour out his spirit. Watch the sequence. It shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions. Now, just as a side reference, Peter in the book of Acts chapter 2 says all this was fulfilled in Acts chapter 2. I hope you will agree with that, Mr. By the way, Michael Smith, you are now banned from all my future broadcasts because you have shown yourself unworthy of a mature discussion. Bye-bye forever. All right. So now, notice that Joel chapter 2 verse 28, Peter says this was fulfilled in Acts chapter 2. Now, what happens after Acts chapter 2? He says, even on male and female servants in those days I will pour out my spirit. Verse 30, and I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness, the moon to blood. We will come back to this because Sean will address it. Before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. Now watch verse number 32. Sean says, and I'm going to replay it here before I actually continue. Let me show you what he just said. Okay. Let's hear what Sean has to say, then I will answer it.
In verse 13, Jesus said that he who endures to the end will be saved. And this is speaking, of course, about salvation, not being saved from the war itself. But Jesus didn't return in 70 AD to save anybody.
Did you notice what Sean said? Jesus is saying about salvation not being saved from the war. Sean says Jesus in Matthew 24 is speaking about being saved in an abstract way rather than being saved from the war. Well, let's see what Joel will have to say about that, because this is the type of homework you do have to do, Sean, if you really want to answer this question. In Joel chapter 2, it says, and it shall come to pass, starting with the sun shall be turned to darkness, the moon to blood, before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. It shall come to pass that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. And the question is, they shall be saved from what? Watch. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those who escape, as the Lord has said, and among the survivors there shall be those whom the Lord calls. So what are they being saved from? And where are they being saved at? In Mount Zion, that's a temple, and in Jerusalem, that's the Middle East, That's the country of Israel. There shall be those who escape. What are they escaping? Well, Joel already told you in verse 1 and verse 2. He told you, context is key. He told you something is happening, something is coming. What is coming? The day of the Lord is coming. Blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain, the temple. Let all the inhabitants of the land of Judah tremble. For the day of the Lord is coming, it is near. It is a day of darkness, gloom, a day of clouds, just as in verse number 30 of Matthew 24, and thick darkness, like blackness there is spread upon the mountains, a great and powerful people, their like has never been seen, nor will again after them through the year. So there were people that were coming, that were going to come on horses. It says their appearance is like the appearance of horses, like war horses. So what are they being saved from? They are being saved from the war. Can I prove this? Yes. Even more so from Isaiah chapter 66. So run with me, if you will, to Isaiah chapter 66, which is recognized universally by all prophetic scholars to be a parallel to Revelation chapter number 20, Matthew 24, and all judgment texts. Okay, so we are going to go to Isaiah chapter 66 from verse number 15. Let's see what people are being saved from on the last day. For behold, the Lord will come in fire, his chariots like the whirlwind, to render his anger in fury and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire the Lord will enter into judgment, and by his sword with all flesh. And those slain by the Lord shall be many. Now, by the way, I know somebody might say, but it says with all flesh. Well, keep that in mind. Those who sanctify and purify themselves to go into the gardens, following one in the midst, eating pig's flesh, and the abomination and mice shall come to an end together, declares the Lord. Why? For I know their works and their thoughts, and the time is coming to gather all nations and tongues. And they shall come, and they shall see my glory. And I will set a sign among them, and from them I will send survivors. Do you see that word? We just saw it in Joel. Let me remind you. We just saw that word of survivors in the book of Joel. Look at it again. Joel chapter number 2, verse number 32, very quickly said that in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, what will happen? You remember? It shall come to pass that everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those who escape, as the Lord has said, and among the survivors. Where? In Mount Zion and in Jerusalem. There shall be those who escape. There shall be survivors. There shall be those who escape. What does Isaiah 66 say? Isaiah 66 says, I will set a sign among them, which is the sign of the cross, and from them I will send survivors. From them, from this final judgment that is taking place in Isaiah 66, I will send survivors to the nations, to Tarshish, to Pul and Lud, who draw the bow, to Tubal and Javan, to the coastlands far away, that have not heard my fame or seen my glory. This text is so profound because this text says that the final judgment takes place in a context in which there are people existing after the final judgment is over that have not heard about God yet. And the survivors of the final judgment, the escapees from Zion, are the ones who go to the nations that have never heard of my fame to tell them what happened in Jerusalem. Whoa. So, in other words, Isaiah 66 is telling you the final judgment is not the final judgment of time. It is not the final judgment of history. It is not the final judgment of the planet. Rather, it is the final judgment of those who go into the gardens following one in the midst who eat mice and abominations. He's talking about the abomination of desolation in the temple, the idolatry. That's Hebraism. So the final judgment in Isaiah 66 happens, and then the survivors go to the nations who have never heard about God. Well, that's exactly what full preterism believes. that the final judgment of Old Covenant Israel took place in Zion, in Jerusalem, in 70 AD, exactly as Jesus prophesied in Matthew 24. And afterwards, the survivors, the escapees, those who actually heeded to Jesus's warnings in Matthew 24:15 and 24:16, they came to the nations and found people like me in Kenya, which we had never heard about Jesus until 1844. Isaiah 66 has me and my people in the Bible after the final judgment. I am living proof that full preterism is 1 billion% accurate if there was such a number. Ain't that amazing? Mind-blowing. So, Brother Sean, with all due respect, pray, because I know Christians always say that, and I should pray also, and I do. Pray, then study, do your homework, and decide to listen to the other side, as the Bible says you should always listen to the other side. Because one side sounds right until you listen to the other one. I don't think you've listened to our side. I don't think you've done your homework. I just don't think you have, with all due respect. So let's continue with Sean and hear what else he might have to say on this topic. And welcome, by the way, Lucy Opio.
But in the end times, this will happen. Reason number 4. In verse 14, Jesus said the gospel would be preached to all the world, and then the end would come. Well, this still hasn't happened, so it couldn't possibly have been fulfilled in 70 AD. Reason.
Now, here is a classic case in which Sean is performing the worst kind of biblical interpretation. In other words, he's going into the text, and many people do this, and I used to do this myself as a pastor. I didn't know any better. I would use eisegesis. Eisegesis is defined as whenever you go into any literary work, any passage of any writing anywhere on any topic, and without understanding what the author is saying and the meaning of the words that the author is using and the context that the author is addressing, you bring in your perspective and your opinion and you impose it on the text. So Sean says in Matthew 24:14, it says, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Surely, clearly, this has not yet happened. It will happen in our future. Right? But, is that what Jesus is saying? Number one, let's go back to the text. We always go back to the text. What is the question Jesus is answering in Matthew 24:14? What is the context of Matthew 24:14? This gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Let's begin with that end. What is the end here? What end is Jesus referring to that we have already established in the past 4 videos? We have established that the only end in view is the end of the temple system. The only end in view is the end of Jerusalem as the site of God's temple. The only end in view is the end of the priesthood of the Levites, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. That's the only end in sight. So therefore, just within its own context, because the disciples asked Jesus, tell us, when will the temple be destroyed? That's the context. That's the bookend. The bookend of all the events in Matthew 24 is, when will the temple be destroyed? Tell us what will happen before it is destroyed. So Jesus gives signs that will take place before the temple is destroyed. That's the end in view. So therefore, when we come to the other part of it where it says, the gospel, this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed in the whole world as a testimony to all nations. This must therefore then take place before the temple is destroyed. Because if it happens after the temple is destroyed, then it does not fit the context of the question asked and the question being answered. Now, I will begin with the simple stuff. Does the New Testament give evidence that the gospel of the kingdom was proclaimed throughout the whole world using those words in our past? Was the gospel proclaimed in the whole world in our past? Well, let's go to the book of Colossians. Colossians, where are you, Mr. Colossians? There it is. Colossians chapter 1. Now we are going to look at two verses here, and I'm going to begin with the most powerful one. I'm going to begin with verse 23. Paul is writing to the Colossians in the late 50s AD. So Paul is writing to the Colossians, just historical context, about 30 years or so after, or maybe not even 30, 25 years, let's say, after Jesus prophesied Matthew 24. But Paul is writing Colossians before 70 AD. Paul is writing Colossians sometime after 50 AD, but sometime before 70 AD. So in between 50 and 60 AD, Paul writes a letter to the Colossians. And this is what he says to the Colossians in verse number 23. I'm going to begin reading from verse 21. And you, and remember, you is always the people being addressed, not you and I. And you, Colossians, who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he has now, confirming that the you people here are living in Paul's time, he has now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him, if indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you had. So this has already happened. Which has been, now watch this, this gospel which you had, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister. So what does Paul report pertaining to the extent that the gospel had spread during the time he wrote to the Colossians? He says, you are not shifting from the hope of the gospel which you have had, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven. Has been. Now watch the text that our brother is saying has not been fulfilled. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Paul says the gospel has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven. Now, either Paul is lying, or Jesus doesn't know what he's talking about, or Sean doesn't know what he's talking about. Who do you think? Who do you think of the three? Either Jesus doesn't know what he's talking about, or Paul doesn't know what he's talking about, or Sean has not done his homework. Which one do you think it is? Because Paul in Colossians 1:23 says the gospel that the Colossians had already been proclaimed in all creation, which means all creation and throughout the world must mean something different than what Sean thinks it means. Watch. In verse number 6 of the same passage, Colossians, Paul says to the Colossians, now watch the words here. Since we heard of your faith, starting on verse 4, in Christ Jesus, and of the love that you have for all the saints, because of the hope laid up for you in heaven, of these you have heard before in the word of truth, the gospel that Jesus said would be preached in the whole world, which has come to you as indeed in the whole world, it is bearing fruit and increasing, as it also does among you, since the day you heard it and understood the grace of God in truth. So how far has the gospel gone, Sean, according to Paul? According to Paul, the gospel has indeed reached the whole world. There are other passages. I'm just going to reference the one reference here by JText, because JText is helping me out here so that I don't have to open it up. Romans 10:18 says, "But I say, have they not heard? Yes, indeed. Their sound has gone out to all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world." So Paul says in Romans 10:18, the gospel has gone out to the ends of the world already. So what is the problem then? Why does Jesus say that the gospel must be proclaimed in the whole world? Does it mean, what is the problem? The problem, Sean, is this. Jesus was not speaking in English. Jesus was speaking in, or at the very least, Matthew is recorded in Greek. Jesus may have said these things in Aramaic. Possible. Jesus may also have said them in Greek because it was the common street language. We are not quite sure. But what we do know is that the oldest manuscripts we have of Matthew are in Greek. And so therefore, the word whole world that is used here must be examined in its Greek context. So therefore, Mr. Sean, what you need to do whenever you're doing these studies is you need to use a tool like this one that I have on the screen, in which I'm going to click on Matthew 24. This is called the Bible Hub, and it is free of charge, so I advise you to get it. You go to the Greek text analysis of Matthew 24:14. You have to do a text analysis of a text you are using as your evidence. And then you look up what is the word in Greek and what is its Strong's definition. So there will be proclaimed this gospel of the Basileus in all the earth. That's the word oikumene. This word oikumene, you can even look it up before you look up the definition. You can click on the word itself. So this is for all of us who like Bible study. You can just look up the word itself. How many times is it used in the New Testament? Well, it is used 3 times in the New Testament, this word oikumene. Now, wait a minute. Are you saying that in the whole New Testament, the word world, the English word world, is used only 3 times? That doesn't sound reasonable, does it? So that should be a clue, flag. Maybe that word doesn't mean what I think it means in English. So look at how it is used. It says the word oikumene is used in Matthew 24:14, which we are looking at. It is also used in Luke 21:26. And it is also used in Acts 19:27. But that's not the only times that actually this word is used, because the word oikumene is number 3625 in the Strong's Concordance. Oikumene. That's the word that is translated world or inhabited earth. Now, this word in the word studies tells you, especially here, it says oikumene is, I'm just skipping to where it gives the most direct definition. Oikumene is the land that is being inhabited, the land in a state of habitation, the inhabited world. That is, and this that is very important, that is the Roman world. For all outside of it was regarded as of no account. Next, it says oikumene literally means the inhabited land. It was originally used by the Greeks to denote the land inhabited by themselves, in contrast with barbarian countries. This is really important. The word oikumene was used by its original users in Greece and its secondary users in Rome to always describe their own world in contrast with the rest of the world. So that the word whole world always, every time, meant the Roman world. Never anything outside of it. Never, ever anything outside of it. In fact, the first time that it is used outside of Matthew is in the book of Luke. In Luke chapter number 2. So Matthew is the first time it is used in the New Testament, in Matthew 24. Then the next time is in Luke 2:1, which I'm going to show you here in a moment. In Luke chapter 2 is a very familiar passage. Luke chapter 2 is a very familiar passage for all Christians. So this one should not be difficult for you to say, oh, I know that. Because Luke chapter 2 is the birth of Christ. We just came from that a couple months ago. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world, that's the word oikumene, should be registered. Really? Caesar Augustus, the Roman emperor, decreed that the whole planet should be registered, that everybody in the whole planet should go to their hometown. Like if you are in South America, you got to go back to Guatemala. You got to go back to North America, South Africa, Central Africa. Is this what Caesar Augustus commanded? No. Caesar Augustus commanded that everyone in the oikumene must go back to their hometown to be registered, census. Oikumene always only refers to the Roman Empire. That's the word that Matthew uses in Matthew 24, verse number 14. So now let's read it with that in mind. So now let's read it correctly, that is. Let's read it correctly. Okay? So now we go to verse number 14. And we read it correctly. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the Roman Empire as a testimony to all nations. The word nations there is not to all countries. The word is ethnies. The word we get our English word ethnic. You've heard of ethnic cleansing? Ethne or ethnos is actually better translated as tribe or tribes. Such that now when you read this text in its proper translation, it reads, oops, sorry guys, something is happening here with my computer, and it does that every now and then. For some reason, it loves to play with me. So it reads and says, so now we are reading it correctly. This gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the Roman Empire as a testimony to all tribes, and then the end will come. Now, notice how it lines up with the context of Matthew 24. Matthew 24 is about the destruction of the temple. That's what Matthew 24 is about. Why is Matthew 24 about the destruction of the temple? Because Matthew 24 is a continuation of the conversation in Matthew 23, in which Jesus declared 7 woes to the stewards of the temple. And when he had declared the 7 woes to the stewards of the temple, and he told them that the judgment was going to come for all the blood they and their fathers had shed since Genesis 4, he tells them it was all going to happen within a generation and that their house was being left desolate. So in Matthew 24, the disciples want to confirm, are you talking about this temple, Jesus? And he says, I'm telling you the truth. Nothing here will remain. They ask him, tell us, when will that happen? So when he says, this gospel will be proclaimed to all the tribes that are associated with the temple before that judgment comes, it is 70 AD. It is 70 AD. Amen? Now, let me look at some of your comments here, just so that I am not ignoring your comments, because we are having a conversation. Now, Father's Joy is the first one. Father's Joy says this: if Jesus did not save anyone during the 70 AD destruction, we would not have the faith that we have today. That is Christianity, would we? No, in fact, we would not. So in fact, in point, I think that was point number 3, where he had said that nobody was being saved from the war. The fact that God fulfilled his promise to save his people and for some people to escape and to survive the judgment event in Joel chapter 2, Isaiah 66, Matthew 24. That's why Christianity exists, because God's promises were fulfilled to the hilt to the max. Selah Pause, I've missed you, man. And Selah Pause, I hope that you know that I'm expecting to see you in July. You are a regular staple of our conference. And I think the conference is actually very close to you, to your daughter out there in Scott. So please, register. And even if you don't register, come anyway. You are always welcome, my brother Selah Pause. So he says, keeping it in context could mean a host of things, but yes, AD 70 is the main thing. Indeed. Here we have another comment from All God Rhythm. He says, how could Daniel be told to seal up the book, but John be told not to seal the book before, because the time was at hand in John's day? That's a very good point. So this goes back to his very first point, where he was saying we cannot know because Daniel was told to seal up the book. But what All God Rhythm is mentioning here is that when you go to Revelation chapter number 22, it says John was told, don't seal up the things in Revelation because they are about to happen. So if Daniel is told not to seal up the things because they are too far away, and yet Revelation is told up, they are told not to seal the things because they are too close, then surely Daniel's things cannot go beyond the things of Revelation. Thank you so much for that point. Then many times, Father Joy says, salvation in the New Testament pertain to the saving of physical lives of the first century saints. Indeed. We also have my good friend Anderson. Mr. Anderson, I would really love to see you in St. Louis in July. I think you can come. It would be great for you to be a part of our conference here in St. Louis. Now he says that these survivors, those who found refuge in the spiritual Zion and in the New Jerusalem, going to the nations after the final judgment. Wow, that's a game changer, brother. I think so. I really believe so. Then Father's Joy also says it will be really good for Christians of differing beliefs to have sincere dialogues to compare notes of what they are seeing in the scriptures. No one has all truth, but we all have pieces of the puzzle. Indeed, I totally agree. Selah Pause, says you have knocked IO out of the park. If you don't know what IO is, Israel only. There are some group of people who say they are Christians who say that Jesus only came to save Israelites only. But obviously in Matthew 10, that idea is done away with. Jesus sends the apostles only to the 12 tribes of Israel. He tells them, don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to the Samaritans. So Jesus is not counting the Gentiles and the Samaritans as Israel. I've already shown you a comment, JTech, so I'm not going to repeat it. Here is a comment by Lucy Opio. John 3:16, for God so loved the world. Does this refer to the Roman world? The word used in John 3:16, that's a very good question based on what I showed earlier, right? Notice that when I mentioned the word oikumene, oikumene is not the word used in John 3:16. It's a different word that is used in John 3:16. So oikumene is used in Luke 2:1, Matthew 24, Acts 19, and many such other places. The word used in John 3:16, without going into too much detail, and I have a video on my YouTube channel called What is the Meaning of the Word World in John 3:16. So just go look for it under my name in my YouTube channel. I have a whole teaching on it. But the word used in John 3:16 for world is the word cosmos. The word cosmos, which is one of 3 words used commonly to describe geography in the New Testament, the word cosmos means a complete system. The word cosmos in Greek is where we get our English word cosmetic. Ladies, cosmetics have to do with your whole face. When you use cosmetics, you cannot only mean lipstick. Cosmetics is a plural word which refers to all the things that you use for your face. Your face is a cosmos. So the word cosmos is not limited to physical world. It is limited to any system that is complete in itself. So John 3:16 says, to answer your question, for God so loved the cosmos that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish. So that already tells you that whatever the cosmos that is in reference there has to do with perishing and being saved from perishing. So when you think about it a little bit deeper, you say, well, why did God give his only begotten son for loving the cosmos? What does that have to do? So he gave his son for the cosmos. Okay. What was the means? What was the context in which Jesus was crucified? Well, Jesus was crucified as a Passover lamb. Jesus was crucified as a scapegoat for the atonement. Jesus was crucified as a burnt offering. Jesus was crucified as a peace offering. All these offerings that are in the Bible, Jesus satisfied all of the offerings required by the law. Question, Lucy. Is the system of the law a self-sustaining, complete system? Or is it an open-ended system? The system of the law, the sacrificial system. Is it a closed system that only applies to a specific context, to a specific people? Or was the sacrificial system a universal system of the planet? Was Jesus crucified on the cross because the sacrificial system of the Zulus required it? Was Jesus crucified to satisfy the requirements of the Muscovites in Moscow? Was Jesus crucified to satisfy the requirements of the system in North America, the Native Americans, or the Aboriginals? If that is so, then the word world there means planet and everybody in the world. But in fact, the truth of the matter is, Jesus was not crucified to satisfy the requirements of any African tribe or any Aboriginal tribe or any Chinese tribe or any South American, South African or South North American tribe. Jesus was crucified to specifically satisfy the requirements of the 12 tribes only. So the word world there means Israel. The word world there means Old Covenant. Not just Israel. Israel is the representative of the Old Covenant world, but the word world there is referring to the Old Covenant system, period. Hopefully that helps. You can find that video where I deal with what does the word world mean in John 3:16, because it's a very important word. Now, the Bible becomes a whole lot smaller once you find out the reason for it. Indeed, and then it becomes a whole lot bigger when you find out its goals, doesn't it? So in other words, the reasons for the Old Covenant make the world smaller, because the Old Covenant world did not include all the people that were in the planet, but the goal of the Bible makes it bigger than the planet and bigger than time. When you add an S, you see 15 references. Oikomenes, yes, that is true. Yes. So there are many more references to the oikomene, but I was just trying to kind of limit myself. Let's see if there is anything else that I want to refer to here. I think Jesus was crucified for the Old Covenant system. Yes, he was, but that was not the only goal in mind, right? That was the reason, that was the cause, but the effect. So cause and effect is very important, right? Why? What is the cause? What caused Jesus to go to the cross? Is the Old Testament system. What was the effect of Jesus going to the cross? It goes wider, right? Because there were promises within the Old Testament system that was saying, you're going to be a blessing, Abraham. Through your seed, I'm going to bless all the families of the world or of the land. All right. So covenant forms the bond law structures life, cosmos is the resulting order. Praise God. So that's a wonderful summary. Helen says Israel centric, not Israel only. Very good summary there. So the Bible is Israel centric, but it is not Israel only, because Israel really comes later in the story. Jacob, who is Israel, is not at the beginning of the book. He is in the middle of the beginning of the book. That's when he comes up, right? He comes up at about what? Genesis 28, Genesis 27 there. That's when Jacob comes up. All right, very good. Now let's continue. We are at 50 minutes, so we are going to look at one more reason that this guy is objecting to full preterism, and we are going to see if he is worthy of a listen. All right, here we go. So this is Sean. He is refuting full preterism. We are using it as a basis to show full preterism is the Mark Daddy of them all.
Number 5. In verse 21, Jesus said that the greatest tribulation the world would ever see would happen at that time. But there's been far greater tribulation in the world than what happened in 70 AD. We only need to look at World War II to see that far more Jews were killed then compared to in 70 AD. So once again, this was not the fulfillment of what Jesus said.
Once again, Sean misses the whole point of Matthew 24. He totally misses. He's conflating Matthew 24 to say Jesus said there will be great wars in the future of the planet. But Jesus was not speaking about the planet. Jesus was speaking about Jerusalem. Jesus was speaking about the temple. We have already established that, so I won't belabor the point too much, but since we have to repeat it. So when Jesus says in Matthew chapter number 24 and verse number 21, let's go back to Matthew 24, and now we go here to verse number 21. It says, For then there will be great tribulation. Put it on screen. For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, and never will be. Now here is a good place to actually look up the word world, because the word world here is not oikumene. The word world here is actually cosmos. I could be wrong. It could be gaze, but let's see. I'm just going off the top of my head. What is the word that is used here? Then there will be tribulation, thalipsis, great, such as has not been from the beginning of the world. Is the word cosmo. It is the word cosmos. So here is the word cosmos that is in John 3:16. Cosmos could mean world, it could mean universe, it could mean order, it could mean adornment. Okay, let's make this bigger. Cosmos literally means something ordered, something lawful, properly an ordered system, like the universe, like creation, like a face, like any system, a soccer, FIFA. The English term cosmetic is derived from 2889 cosmos, the order, the ensemble used for treating the face as a whole. Okay, so the word cosmos there just means order. So now, go back to our text. It says that, for then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, nor never will be. Now, remember when we began, we looked at Daniel. Daniel is the source that Jesus is using. Well, not the only source, but the main source that Jesus is using in Matthew 24. And in Daniel 12, Daniel says this, Daniel 12:1. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as has never been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time, your people will be delivered. Everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And then Daniel 12:11 puts the timing. It says that this great tribulation will take place from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there would be 1,290 days. So if you compare that with Matthew, Jesus says in verse 15, so when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place of the temple, the first room beyond the outer court, the room between the outer court and the Holy of Holies. When you see that, remember they are discussing when will the temple be destroyed. The temple must be destroyed after the abomination of desolation, which means that when the abomination of desolation takes place at the temple, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Why? For then there will be great tribulation. Where? In Judea. In Judea. That's the center of the great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, and nor never will be. So again, context, audience relevance. That by itself just disqualifies what Sean is trying to say. Just disqualifies it completely. Now, we are at 56 minutes, so I'm going to end this session here also, so that all the sessions henceforth are less than an hour. So, but I will read this one last comment here by Required Mailbox. It says, all genealogical records were destroyed in 70 AD. Modern Jews are not the ones from the Bible. That's a very important point there, that great tribulation cannot happen for modern day Jews. So he compares, by the way, well, Jews have suffered more in World War II. Sure, more Jews were killed by Hitler than died in 70 AD. But here is a qualifier. Were the Jews that were killed by Hitler, and it's a regrettable thing, and by the way, there have been more Holocausts in Africa, greater than the Jewish Holocaust. I wonder why no one speaks about the Holocaust of Belgium that they carried out in Congo. But everyone in the world has to learn about the Jewish Holocaust. And it's good to learn about the Jewish Holocaust, but show respect for everybody in the world too. Jews are not the only important people in the world. They are just as important as everybody else, and everybody else is just as important as them. But anyway, why did the Jews suffer under Hitler? Was it because of the issues of Matthew 24? No. The Jews that were holocausted by Hitler were not being unalived because of Matthew 24. Whereas the Jews that were slaughtered in Jerusalem in 70 AD were fulfilling what Jesus said would happen in Matthew 24. So Jesus didn't say after that they will never suffer again. No. In fact, I can show you many passages that show no. There is going to be suffering even now and henceforth, as long as time exists, and the Bible never postulates that time will ever end. There will always be opportunities for suffering for people. But the Great Tribulation must happen before the sacrificial system ends in 70 AD. That will bring us to an end of this particular session. I will start the next one immediately. And it will be the last one that I'll do for today. Hopefully I'll be able to handle all the objections that Sean has, because we are at the 5th one, so we are going to the 6th one. He has 12 of them. But it's about 3 o'clock, so the next one starts in about 5 minutes, and it will go on for at least an hour. So if you want to join me with showing that full preterism is true and that futurism cannot refute full preterism biblically, you are welcome to join me in the next session. Thank you very much.